Dear colleagues, we are about to start.
Good morning, distinguished delegates. It's my pleasure to open this first workshop of Koronivia Joint Work on Agriculture on behalf of the SABSTA Chair and SBI Chair. Unfortunately, they cannot open the workshop personally due to other commitment today. As many of you will know, both Emmanuel and Paul are watching this item very closely. They asked me to emphasize that they consider the Koronivia roadmap as a very important work. Both chairs regret that they cannot be here personally and asked me to convey the message that they are looking forward to hear about today's good discussion and a positive and energetic kickoff of the work under the Koronivia roadmap. Looking at the agenda, I see that we have a full day ahead of us, considering how we, under this convention, can contribute to more sustainable agricultural practice and safeguarding food security under a changing climate. Agriculture is an extremely important and vulnerable sector, and I wish you all possible success in finding ways how this forum can effectively contribute to funding and implementing solutions. As announced in the plenary yesterday, the workshop will be co-facilitated by Heikki and Milagros. Heikki and Milagros, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Aderito Santana, and good morning all, and also good morning all distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It is my and my co-facilitators' pleasure also on our behalf to welcome you to this first workshop on Koronivia roadmap under SBI and SABSTA joint work. And as you heard just a while ago from Mr. Santana, Paul and Emmanuel, they are not able to join with us. They have asked us to emphasize that they look forward to seeing good outcome from this workshop, and we will report back to them already today and later tomorrow on the discussion and progress made here today. The workshop will be conducted in two in-session workshops. We will have now time until 1 p.m. and then we will, after the lunch break, we will continue from 3 to 6 p.m. The working language of this workshop is English. And now let me introduce the approach that might help all of us to make the efficient use of the time that we have today. You have seen the tentative agenda on the website, and accordingly, first we would like to ask the Secretariat to give the presentation on the past 5 SABSTA workshops that were held between the 2013 and 2016. And those will comprise important inputs to the workshop today. Then we are very glad to announce that we have representatives from the 8 constituted bodies under the convention who will give us an overview about the mandate of each constituted bodies, past work that may relate to the agriculture, and also an outlook towards the future work. They will also be available for questions and answers and brainstorming together. However, we have been informed that some of those representatives have also other engagements, and we need to reflect a little bit on the time adjustment in this regard. But we are grateful for their presence here today with us. In the afternoon, we will start with a small panel of experts from a few countries and organizations, which will share their concrete good experiences from working with constituted bodies to implement concrete action on climate change in the agriculture sector. After a question and answer session with the panel, we will then open a broader discussion on which we can learn from the past workshops and how to move forward in the discussions on modalities for implementations. Parties will be given the priority in the speaking list, as it is usual practice. However, through the SAPSTA and SBI conclusions that also adapted the Koronivia roadmap in May, parties have encouraged observers to participate in the Koronivia workshops. We therefore look forward to also hear views from observers in today's discussions. And for that reason, the Secretariat have reserved a few seats on the left-hand side from me with a microphone, so that the observers who may wish to have the questions or remarks should, on the rolling basis, be kindly invited to come closer to the microphone. So that's the technical solutions that we have been able to find. We have one day of work ahead of us. This will be an intensive day, and it looks like a lot of time, but we also have a full agenda, and we therefore also encourage all of you to keep your interventions relatively short and to the point, preferably making focused suggestions or reaching to each other more than just making ordinary statements. I hope this approach is agreeable to all parties present here. Good. Once again, I thank you very much for your all coming here, and we look for very constructive and fruitful discussions. And now I would like to invite Dirk from the UNFCCC Secretariat to give us a presentation on the past work on agriculture under the Framework Convention on Climate Change. Dirk, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Heikki. I will speak briefly about how we came where we are now in the discussions on agriculture under the UNFCCC. I will try to give a few views on common elements that can be extracted on the 5 workshop reports, especially the role of the SAPSTA, because this has been naturally, because these were SAPSTA workshops, the focus of these discussions. I will give a few ideas that come out of the workshop reports on linkages with processes outside the convention, and then end with a summary of key points. Let's go into a brief overview of agriculture under the UNFCCC. First, I would like to emphasize that agriculture has been one sector of all the sectors under consideration in basically all work streams that we have under the convention. But there have also been additional discussions taking place under the ad hoc working group on long-term cooperative action under the convention, the AWG-LCA, which concluded in 2017, which was my first COP, with the COP requesting the SAPSTA to consider issues relating to agriculture. The discussions on this were initiated at SAPSTA 36, and over time the SAPSTA agreed to hold in total 5 thematic workshops on this matter. And I don't want to go into reading the titles of all the 5 workshops. I just would like to say that these cover a very, very broad range of topics under agriculture already. So these have been extremely rich, and I don't even want to indicate that I can summarize all of what was discussed in these 5 workshops in my short presentation today. We had the first kickoff workshop here in Poland at Subster 39 on science and the current state of scientific knowledge. Then we went with 2 in-session workshops into Subster 42, 2015, even before the Paris Agreement was adopted, on mainly early warning systems and the assessment of risk and vulnerability. And then after Paris was adopted in 2016, in the June session in Bonn, we had at Subster 44 2 in-session workshops on identification of adaptation measures and on, in a broad way, agricultural practices and technologies to enhance productivity in a sustainable manner. Now, if I would like to talk about these 5 workshops in depth and about all the topics, I would probably have a 3 days lecture before we even start the workshop. So I try to focus on what I think has been identified in the workshop reports as common elements, where I think where all parties agreed pretty much in the rooms was that adverse effects of climate change already pose a major threat to the productivity of agricultural systems in several ways, and that climate change also exacerbates existing socioeconomic challenges, inequalities, vulnerabilities, thus affecting food security and livelihoods of people. There was an agreement that we have in this sector a fundamental priority of safeguarding food security while improving the productivity and promoting the adaptive capacity of agriculture. There's hardly any other sector where adaptation and mitigation is as interlinked as in this one. There was, as a conclusion of all of these points, a feeling for an urge for urgent action on agriculture and climate change, and that it needs to put farmers at the centers. It has to be something that where the farmers see a difference, and where they also have opportunities to provide feedback. Another challenge we have in this one that came clearly out of the 5 workshops is that we have a huge diversity of stakeholders, agricultural systems, ecosystems, climatic conditions, and national circumstances, and that the work here should be facilitated in a way to realize synergies and avoid duplication of efforts among these stakeholders and actors. There's an important element of support, including access to finance, technology, and know-how. And transformational change in the sector will require effective coordination of different institutions and policymakers, including, of course, the active engagement of local communities and farmers. There's a need to enhance knowledge sharing among parties and relevant stakeholders, and there's a key role for international cooperation and collaboration to make all of this happen. I think this is the role we're talking about here now and in the future of the Koronivia joint work. Now, the mandate that we are under here has 3 elements. First is working with constituted bodies, and I'm very happy to have the 8 representatives of the constituted bodies presenting that, so that I can skip over this part. Then we have the element of modalities for implementation, which to me always means who does what, and because I'm a bit pedantic, also when, but that's not necessary. And the third one is the outcomes of the past 5 in-session workshops under the Subster. Presenting today, I focused on what can be identified in modalities in our reading from the 5 workshop reports. And in particular with regards to the Subster and the Subster role, given that this. And I think we have several slides of this. There's one on scientific knowledge, where the Subster could deal with the impact of climate change on agriculture. And it could also deal with scientific and technological issues on a higher level related to agriculture and climate change, with a view to informing national actions. It could deal with technologies, practices, and know-how that improve the efficiency and productivity of agricultural systems. It could deal with initiatives that could be launched for sharing experiences on adaptation in agriculture, for example, by providing a platform for relevant systems, information system to interact, or in other ways. It could discuss the role of loss and damage in agriculture and adaptation, and options for improved cooperation in general in research and development. These were some of the key points of the very, very first workshop, which was maybe less focused on a topic than the other ones. And I'm rushing through this a little bit just to give an overview, because I think most people are familiar with the workshop reports. But there's also other things that the SAPSA could do on early warning systems and contingency plans. And what we extracted from the workshop reports in that regard is that it could assist governments and communities with expertise in developing these early warning systems and contingency plans. SAPSA could help building technical, financial, and human capacity in the coordinating institutions, could promote and strengthen public-private partnerships, because the private sector has an important role. Basically, every farmer could be considered as private sector. And it could also encourage collaborative participation by farmers in any contingency plans and linking indigenous knowledge to scientific and early warning systems. In the identification of adaptation measures workshop, there was a lot of discussion about the SAPSA's role in access to information, but strengthen national systems for collecting the information. The idea of enhancing expertise on climate-related pests and diseases, as well as in the use of control and management methods. SAPSA could provide assistance to governments and communities, again, for implementing adaptation measures in response to extreme weather events. Participants of the workshop identified that the support could be provided for the establishment of accessible regional climate databases and for research addressing climate change impacts on agriculture, including potential economic impacts. And providing means for implementation was also discussed as one of the aspects that SAPSA could consider. I think this is the last list on agricultural practices and activities to enhance productivity. There's the exchange of information on efficient water management and irrigation systems, with assessment of ecosystem-based approaches, on and off farming practices and technologies, providing access to integrated technologies for the control of climate change-induced pests and diseases, exchange of information and knowledge, climate-informed agriculture insurance, capacity building, and the identification of innovative technologies. I think what this shows is that we have identified in the 5 workshops already a wealth of roles and roles of objectives that could be achieved and which would be seen useful. We also have, and I will not read it, I will just show it, a great number of linkages that were identified with different institutions, organizations, and initiatives outside of the convention, which could help in implementing or developing their work under the Koronivia joint work on agriculture. And of course, there were quite a few more points raised during the workshops, in general and in specific terms. You just want to give an overview of the vast number of actors that we have, and also the diversity that could help with the work. And I don't think that one actor can do it all. Coming to the end of the presentation, just a few key points that come out again and again, and for the role of the SAPSA and beyond, and for the role of the convention, and which came from all the 5 workshops to different degrees. There's a need for sharing experience in research and development and in the implementation of agriculture and climate change activities. We need to address a lack of scientific knowledge on climate change impacts on agriculture in many aspects. And we need to facilitate the identification, implementation, and scaling up of agricultural practices and technologies and in cooperation with knowledge sharing among partners. There's a need to assist parties in downscaling climate scenarios that exist to make it useful and to develop multi-layered risk and vulnerability maps for different climatic events in order to enhance the resilience by strengthening risk management approaches. There's a need to facilitate access to technologies and expertise in order to develop new services for the agricultural sector and make them available where they're needed. There was very often brought up a need for more finance options for the agriculture sector. And a very important point for us here to consider is potential areas for synergy among the various processes under the convention, including closer cooperation among all the established platforms and bodies, and also with organizations outside of the convention. And the final slide, just to say what we have in reoccurring themes, just to bring it to a very meta level, is exploring potential for synergies among existing processes very broadly. Finding practical ways to support parties in the collaborative identification and development of advanced agricultural practices and technologies, came out very often, and exploring the potential of processes under the convention to enhance knowledge exchange and sharing of parties' experiences in areas of common interest in different ways. And I can see that there's a lot of very general work that has been done in the past where we identified things that are needed. And I'm very glad to see in this workshop that we're now moving into another phase where we think about how can these needs be addressed and who could do what to address them, what could modalities do to help achieve these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I think we all appreciated very much of this very condensed but very substantive summary of the 5 past workshops. I think it would be good if there are any questions for immediate clarifications at this point from anyone. We are not engaging now into any debate, but if there are any questions for clarifications, maybe that would be now a possibility. Dirk, I assume that these slides will be posted on the web. If you please. They are there already, so we can all go back and see those more on Toro. I see no flags coming up. I think your presentation was very good and self-explanatory. No further questions. Thank you so much. Good. And now I think it would be useful that we go to the next steps in our workshop today. And in this, the constituted bodies. That the representatives of constituted bodies, they have been given the 3 sort of guiding questions, as you have seen in the agenda. Namely, it would be useful to all of us to understand what is the general mandate of the constituted body. Second, how has the work of the constituted body contributed to the parties' implementation of work on agriculture? And third, how can the work of constituted body help parties to advance their work on agriculture? And we will have the presentations by the representatives of the constituted bodies. We will start from the adaptation committee, and then we will, the following one will be the least developed countries expert group, as you have seen in the agenda. And as I told in the beginning, if there are any other requirements from other representatives, please come to whisper to the secretariat, and we will adjust the order accordingly. So in this respect, I would now like to invite Mr. Julio Cordano. He is representing the adaptation committee. So please, Julio, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, especially after hearing, thank you, such a consistent and comprehensive presentation on the good work that has been done under this item. And I will try in this presentation to on behalf of the Adaptation Committee, to present some of the ideas that I think can address the questions that were raised for this workshop. I'm going to go straight to the presentation. As you know, maybe this is an opportunity to share with you that the Adaptation Committee is an overarching body that was created as part of the Cancun Adaptation Framework, with the aim of accelerating global adaptation action by providing authoritative technical advice and guidance to parties. So it has this double spirit of trying to spur action in the field, but doing it through technical guidance to parties. The Adaptation Committee was established as part of the Cancun Adaptation Framework in 2010. As I was saying before, it is mandated to promote the implementation of enhanced action on adaptation in a coherent manner under the Convention. And I will break down this mandate in the four main work streams that you see in the screen. Well, first of all, this come from the original mandate of the Adaptation Committee, and they are, first of all, promoting overarching coherence, and this has been part of the work of the Adaptation Committee since the beginning. And if you want to have more details on this work that we have been doing, you can visit the webpage of the Adaptation Committee to see specific details under each of these four work streams. In the case of the promoting overarching coherence, you will see that there is also the mandate for the Adaptation Committee to oversee that the institutional arrangements under the Convention are coherent among themselves in terms of adaptation. And that is very much for example, one of the mandates that came from Paris for the Adaptation Committee. The second work stream is providing technical support and guidance to the parties on adaptation action, which is pretty straightforward. The third one is providing technical support and guidance to the parties on means of implementation. So it's very similar to the last one, but with the emphasis on means of implementation. And we have been developing a whole line of work with the GCF and many other institutions under the Convention. And the last one, but not least, last but not least, awareness raising, outreach, and information sharing. And I think this is a call for our own work to be understandable, to be easy to access, and user-friendly. The next two slides are a little bit more detail on each of the work streams. As you can see there, the first one, promoting overarching coherence, is precisely about collaborating with other relevant institutions, organizations, frameworks, etc., under and outside the Convention to enhance implementation of adaptation action. The second one, which is providing technical support on action, has mainly, but not only, mainly been about producing technical papers that try to summarize the current level of understanding and knowledge on each of the subjects or specific subjects that have been brought to the attention of the Adaptation Committee. And there is a wealth of information that has been accumulated over the years that I think it could be beneficial to this particular workshop. It is also important to mention that the Adaptation Committee has been organized around, for a few subjects, around task forces like for example a NAP task force that it is comprised not only of adaptation committee members, but also from other institutional arrangements, and it has to the idea of looking into the work that parties have been doing in developing national adaptation plans, and to see where are the gaps of knowledge, where are the gaps of technical support that are needed to be covered. And of course, agriculture is one of those things that appear very, very often in national adaptation plans. Just to go into the third work stream, providing technical support and means of implementation, I just briefly refer to the work that we've been doing in connecting with the financial institutions under the convention, like the GCF, and also a very important line of work, which is connecting to the private sector. The adaptation committee have been discussing long and hard about how to connect adaptation action in the private sector, which is really one of the areas of possible expansion of the work that from the convention has been done in adaptation action. And awareness raising, outreach and information is just the last work stream. Takes a form basically on bulletins and sometimes translating the technical papers into user-friendly publications like leaflets and triptychs and material of that kind. Now, going to agriculture, even if I think agriculture stands out clearly as one of the areas of great interest to parties in general, we need to also recognize that the adaptation committee work is not focused on specific sectors. So this has to be bear in mind to understand what the connections can be between the agriculture and the adaptation committee. And nevertheless, if you go through the documents of the adaptation committee, you will see that agriculture shows up and appears very often in the form of references to the sector, or even more frequently in the case of case studies. Yeah, I think I covered the other points as well. I wanted to also emphasize one of the recent developments that we have had in the work of the adaptation committee, which was the workshop that was organized with the incorporation with the International Trade Center that happened in Geneva last month or so. Yeah, it was very recent. So recent that I don't remember exactly the date, but it was very recent. I was there. And the title of the workshop was Fostering the Engagement of the Agri-Food Sector in Resilience to Climate Change. And I also need to mention that that particular workshop was also focused on small and medium enterprises in agriculture. And I have to say that the attendance was very good. There was so many expressions of interest from private sector to hold, presentations. That many workshops had to be organized within the workshop, and we have many presentations, and it was a very fruitful exchange. 3 main topics were covered: assessing climate risks for enterprises in the agri-food sector and designing adaptation strategies, implementing climate change adaptation strategies, and designing policies to scale up private sector adaptation action. And I think it's in the next slide. Yes. I was going to say that look up for the report that is being prepared, that we will be published very soon. I think the report will make justice to the richness of the debates, and you will recognize many of the topics that have been the focus of attention of this workshop, and of course this agenda item and the substance SBI. I just want to see if I missed anything. Yeah, I think I would invite you to look at the report that, as I was saying before, will be published very soon, and it will cover all of the elements that appear on the screen. Finally, I wanted to make a couple of points on how the adaptation committee maybe can coordinate and serve the purposes of agriculture and the Koronivia workshop, the Koronivia work program. First of all, the AC's work, as I was presenting at the beginning of the presentation, has the mandate of providing technical support for parties in adaptation, and from that point of view, the AC work can help parties advance their work in agriculture by disseminating and building on the outcomes of the agri-food sector workshop that was held last month in Geneva. The second way that we identify as a possible cooperation and connection with Koronivia could be incorporating an agriculture lens into upcoming technical papers. I think this can be applicable to most of it, if not all, the technical papers that are being developed by the adaptation committee, and there are a few of them in the upcoming work plan that we just approved in our last meeting that will start being implemented next year. The other element can be providing guidance to the Nairobi work program on potential agriculture-related activities. As you know, the Nairobi work program is an information hub, if you want, to provide to address information gaps of developing countries, parties in adaptation, and of course there is a very close relationship between the IC and the NWP on this topic. So that could be also an important space for collaboration in agriculture. And I was just mentioning the papers, the technical papers that have been developed by the AC, yes, and maybe particularly relevant to Koronivia work. The Koronivia work could be specifically the method to approaches for assessing adaptation co-benefits and resilience that is part of the mandate of Koronivia. So that's the end of my presentation, and I will have to excuse myself because I have to be somewhere else very soon. But of course, we are very happy to collaborate with Koronivia, and on behalf of the AC, please accept our appreciation for the work that you are doing, and of course, we're very happy to identify opportunities to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie, on excellent presentation and also your very kind words on hoping to cooperate also in the future. That's very promising to all of us. As we heard, Julio, he has to leave quite soon. So if there are any specific questions to him regarding the adaptation committee at this stage, I think it would be appropriate to get the clarification at least at this stage. Any questions? Yes, please, Kenya, you have the floor.
Co-chairs, thanks. It's good to see you there leading us. Thanks to the SC for a very good presentation, very useful. It would have been useful if you could have done some, because one of the issues you've raised is that engagement with GCF, to indicate to us to what extent you've been able to work with GCF and other financing mechanisms to catalyze resources that would support climate resilient agricultural work into agriculture. And then two, we will be very keen to learn more about the technical papers that you have approved and which you are looking forward to, so that we are able to see to what extent some of the issues that are emerging from Koronivia work, we could see how they can be taken on board, so that the paper that you're producing can be able to be very comprehensive. Then three, And this I throw to the floor, and I think Doug did a very good summary of the work that has been done within the UNFCCC. And one of the things that has been emerging is the whole question of knowledge hub, knowledge sharing. And you've just indicated to us that the Nairobi Work Program is the instrument for SC for knowledge sharing and information. So I think the question will be, how do we see us either using the Nairobi Work Program in a manner that it also responds to the needs of agriculture, or what can we do differently in order, bear in mind that we have farmers and who may not have that access of some of this. How do we make it useful, or what instrument will be advisable to enable farmers to be able to get the requisite knowledge that they will help to plan? Thanks.
Thank you very much. You had actually three very substantive questions. So maybe, Julio, if you are able to respond, and then if there are any other clarifying questions, please think about those at the same time. Please, Julio.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the questions. I think they are absolutely relevant, and I will try to address those questions. I would see that basically it's about. I will cluster the questions in terms of the finance question, the GCF, and the role of the Nairobi Work Program. On the finance, as I was saying before, of course, means of implementation is one of the work streams of the AC. So it's a very core, it's a very central part of our work. And on that regard, I hope I will make justice to the work that we're doing, but I just wanted to provide a couple of examples. We are developing a work with the GCF. Of course, the GCF is an independent body, and they will look at their own governance and their structures and their decisions. But we are trying to reach out to them and to express where are the gaps, where can be synergies to work together, and to try to work together also in identifying some of the hard questions. Like, for example, there was an important workshop on the private sector in adaptation organized by the GCF that was trying to look at the emerging situation that adaptation is not receiving enough funding. Or it is not as easy as it looks to provide funding for adaptation as it is for mitigation. And this is, of course, a very serious concern that we're trying to take on board and to try to identify where the capacity building issues are from parties to create good products, good projects that can be presented and approved by the GCF. It's not an easy question. I would encourage you also to read the report of that particular workshop that happened early this year, I believe. That present also all the complexities that are around the issue. And the other example I wanted to present is that the AC is, of course, working on what experiences have been of parties in accessing funding. What are the hurdles that parties have been facing, and what can we learn from each other in order to have good practices on what to do in that respect. And I think it's also fair to say that the means of implementation issue goes far beyond the GCF. There is the problem of means of implementation, or the challenge of means of implementation, covers many other aspects, and has to do also with enabling environments, with public-private partnerships, with many other things that also appear in many documents that have been the result of or outcomes of the work of the AC. So I think it's very relevant, and I hope this helps answer the question. On the Nairobi Work Program, again, Nairobi Work Program is a program. It's not an institution per se, but we work very closely with them. And the Nairobi Work Program has a very special characteristic that is made out of partners, institutions outside of the convention that contribute to address the knowledge gaps identified in adaptation. And the NWP, of course, tries to synthesize that information and present it to parties in order to make it useful for specific purposes. And I guess one of the things that needs to be underlined is that the Nairobi Work Program is always trying to go to parties, to understand parties, to learn from parties, to see where the gaps are. But I think it's also very important that parties go to the NWP and understand what the NWP can do for them. And from that point of view, I think one of the very important topics that can be discussed in this particular workshop would be exactly how the NWP, from its mandate, can contribute to the work of Koronivia. I think that would make an excellent connection, and I think that's a very good opportunity to be developed here.
Okay, thank you very much. And I saw, Madam, you wanted to reflect a little bit on here. We will have the longer debate later, but I think, please, if you want to reflect a little bit that one, please have the floor. Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. And just because Julio's leaving soon, I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank you for the report, and I wanted to ask if your committee would consider that we could put this report in our platform, in the PCCB platform, in order for knowledge sharing, and as well as announce in we are launching in this hub a capacity hub for capacity building in Facebook, and we would also like to announce this workshop as well as the advancements on the committee, because that's the way we can strengthen our work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and I see nodding. So I think this is very useful that we bring different representatives of different constituted bodies together, and there is this kind of feeding into that regard. And this is exactly what we were looking for. We still have the one. Just. Thank you very much for coming. We have one more question for Adaptation Committee, and then I'm afraid that we need to move forward, but still we will have time to discuss collectively in the afternoon. So Brazil, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for organizing this very important workshop. Thank you, Dor, for your presentation as well, very interesting. For the Adaptation Committee, very briefly, I just want, maybe if you can explore a bit in terms of how do you foresee the work of the committee dealing with aspects related to socioeconomics, and how do you understand, or if you are working in elements related to translating the perception of climate change to people? Because here in this forum, when we're dealing in agriculture within this group, I mean, as we just heard from George, we're dealing with farmers, people who are lacking possibly the capacity to understand the concepts that we are dealing with, and will be very beneficial to them to have better tools, better ways, so that they can understand the concept as well, and in a broader manner, as well as in the same sense, if you are working with tools or some elements related to the technological component that you're dealing with, or technical component, on how to access or help governments to to better understand the impacts of their actions that are already being taken, policy actions or actions as a whole, NAMAs or NDCs, in terms of adaptation. This is a real big challenge for countries to understand how the actions that they are taking or developing are impacting the sector in terms of adaptation in a two-way approach. So it's important to understand the impacts as well as the lack or the needs in terms of additional actions that should be implemented. So having tools or methods to better measuring and helping to steer the implementation of actions, policies, I mean, it's really important. So just if you could touch very shortly on those topics. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And just to clarify, Kenya, do you want to come back or do you have additional question? If you have a question, one additional question, because then we need to move forward. Please, sir, Kenya, and then I ask Julia to respond. Please.
Thanks, Chair, and sorry for coming back. Yeah, I didn't get the answer for the technical papers because I thought that was very important because as Brazil has just indicated, we part of the topics that we're discussing here are technical and sometimes useful if they can emerge and how can they inform the work. But the more importantly, which I think would help us on the way forward, is if you recall the summary presented by the Secretariat of the work that has been done under agriculture in the UNFCCC, and you look at the mandate and the work that you're planning to do, what do you see? Is there anything we can do as parties under this joint work that can help the work of AC to advance agriculture? So the point I'm asking, for example, is looking at your mandate, is there a gap which may require us making some decision to support you or some recommendation or something that helps you to do more work or do something that we think we are doing? That's the point otherwise, so that we're looking at the way forward, because the question is, how do we implement the things that we are discussing under this? And I think looking at the mandate, looking at what is we've done and where we're going, is there anything that we can do to support your work and make it better so that agriculture can find space in all the, other than the financing, into technology, into the capacity building and all that broader aspect that will enhance adaptation?
I think that was very good clarification and reminding on. Maybe, Julia, you try to respond to both of these questions, and then we really need to move forward to the least developed country expert group experiences. Please, Julia.
Okay, thank you, and apologies for not referring to technical papers. It escaped my memory, so I apologize for that. And this is an important topic that within the AC we've been discussing quite a lot. How to achieve a balance between the technical information that needs to cover the needs of all parties, but at the same time make it implementable at the ground level, so it doesn't stay as just a sort of a technical paper that is very general and sort of overarching and covers everything, but at the same time it's difficult to apply in specific circumstances, and that's a difficult task, because if you see the mandate of the AC, you can see that it is not mandated to specifically address specific issues in specific regions or specific sectors, but to provide technical advice to all parties in adaptation. And yet we see the need to try to make that, to bridge that gap and try to connect the general with the specific. And we have tried to do that as much as we can, because there are technical difficulties in doing that as well. There are many circumstances, many specificities in regions and communities, etc., that need to be addressed in order to provide answers to the specific needs. And we've done things like, for example, under the work stream on awareness raising, we've prepared videos for dissemination of the adaptation challenges that was produced a few years ago. But also we have tried to make technical papers user friendly. Sorry, and I think this also refers to the last question. I mean, what can parties do to facilitate our work? Of course, we are serving the parties. So all the feedback that we get from parties on what specific needs can be covered by the adaptation committee are very welcome. And it's important also to remember that the adaptation committee works on the basis of the mandate of the COP. It reports to the COP. And therefore, anything that comes from the COP they come from parties through the COP can be integrated in our work plan. So one of the things that the Koronivia work can do, of course, is make reference to this connection and maybe tell us if there are specific issues that can be covered by the adaptation committee work. We are starting a new work plan of a 3-year dynamic work plan. So it is a timely opportunity to do exactly that and to foster the dialogue with parties. Of course, we are always willing to do that.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thanks for responding. There is a lot of work has been done, but of course there seems to be more that could be done, and I think we are all grateful for the work. So and thank you very much for your openness to come here and to share your views and experiences, and we look forward to continuing working with you. Now, as I said, we need to move forward. The next one, what we have been asked to do is to focus on the least developed countries expert group. And in this respect, we have the Mrs. Michelle Winthrop, who will have the presentation on the left. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this great opportunity. I am a member of the Least Developed Countries Expert Group. I'm one of the few members who's not actually from a least developed country, but being Irish, my heart is very firmly in agriculture, so I was nominated to come and present to this group, so I'm among friends. I'm afraid I also will have to run away briefly, but I will be back later on, so I can take questions immediately after this, or I look forward to participating in the discussions further on in the day. So the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, I'll run through this reasonably quickly. It's fairly straightforward. We've been around for a long time. We were established in 2001. We are the only constituted body of the convention that is specifically targeted at the needs of least developed countries. And you can see here a list of our various mandates. We are very similar to the Adaptation Committee in that our mandates are at the generic technical level. So we have very little mandate to engage in sector-specific work. Nonetheless, we try. You see here on the right-hand side a list of our current work areas. The most important really is the provision of technical guidance and support to national adaptation plans. We work closely with our LDC colleagues around access to the GCF for NAPs. There's some residual work on NAPAs, National Adaptation Plans of Action. We are working at the moment on technical guidelines around vulnerable communities and ecosystems, for example. And then we have wider work which touches on collaboration with other organizations and constituted bodies, for example, and work that is very much explicitly serving the convention, such as an assessment we have recently completed around assessment of progress in NAPS, which was done jointly with the Adaptation Committee. So we have a lot of collaboration with the AC in particular, although arguably we could do more. I think perhaps for this group, it's perhaps more interesting to look at some of the modalities we use in supporting the LDCs. So we do place a lot of emphasis on the technical materials, the NAP technical guidelines, and a suite of supplementary guidelines that have been produced or in some cases are still under production. We place a lot of emphasis also on NAP training events and NAP expos and regional exchanges. Now, those are primarily targeted at our focus group, which is LDCs, but we, of course, wherever we can, collaborate with the AC and others because there's a lot of good experience, particularly from middle-income countries and so on, that we aim to tap into as well as provide support to. And then we have a series of activities around monitoring of progress, effectiveness, gaps and needs, and so on. But here you see roughly how we work, and that will give you a sense of how perhaps the entry points exist. So I'll focus down on a couple of these modalities. The first one is around guidelines. We produced some years ago the National Adaptation Plan's technical guidelines, and these are, if you haven't read it, I would urge you to do so. It's a very straightforward and practical guide to how to go about national adaptation planning, and I think we've had a lot of feedback from parties that have really found it useful. Since then, we have been working on supplementary guidelines. For example, there is one on agriculture, forestry and fisheries. We have one on water, for example. We have one on gender. And really they are supposed to be the opportunity to drill into sectoral issues for NAP focal points and indeed implementation teams at party level. We have a hectic calendar of training on NAPAs and NAPs. Some of this we do ourselves as LEG members. We actually deliver the training with the strong support, of course, of the Secretariat. In many cases, though, we also reach out to our colleagues in the NAP Technical Working Group, and that really is a suite of technical expertise agencies, including, for example, FAO, including the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Programme of the CGIAR system, WMO and others. And really we sort of organise their work around our calendar of events. So we have opportunities to provide generic advice and training to LDCs, but also opportunities then for technical agencies to drill in a little into sectors. This is just a helpful little piece which shows you the distribution of NAPA projects by sector and theme. And as you can see, of course, agriculture and food security is enormous in importance. And I think, you know, it almost goes without saying, but it's worth saying, you know, for many of our client group, for our LDCs, really agriculture and food security is the #1 adaptation challenge. And we are very acutely aware of that. And so there is a strong emphasis on those themes. You also see terrestrial ecosystems forms quite a strong emphasis too. Now that's from the NAPAs, but all evidence suggests that the NAPs, as they are coming on stream, really are mirroring these trends. Here you can see some of the specific agriculture-related supplements that have been produced, mostly last year. So the FAO guidelines to support the integration of genetic diversity into adaptation planning and NAPs. Also, the FAO addressing agriculture, forestry and fisheries in national adaptation plans. And then an excellent piece by the CCAF's programme, 10 Best Bet Innovations for Adaptation in Agriculture. FAO are also in the process of producing a forestry-specific supplementary guidance. And then I suppose the last piece that we're working on, which is of relevance, I think, to the Koronivia work programme, is we're working on guidance to help parties align their national adaptation plan instruments behind, well, the SDGs principally, but also sectoral investment plans. Where you have countries that have very strong comprehensive agriculture development plans, we want to be able to assist them to align the adaptation investments and actions behind that. And it's still work in progress, but we hope in the coming months to actually produce very clear step-by-step guidance about how they can align those objectives and actions. I think I'll end with a nice slide of us all. There we all are, in case anybody wants to reach out to any of us. I suppose just in thinking about how we can continue to respond to the challenge of working more closely with the work programme, I think, really further outreach in our trainings and our expos is an important area or an important modality for us. And in fact, we have a NAP Expo coming up in the spring of next year, and we're already in discussions with FAO and the CG system to have an agriculture-specific focus or space in the margins of that. And then I think as the supplementary guidelines for NAPs come on stream and start to get used more, and we start to get more feedback on them, I think we see a great opportunity for richness in further collaboration with the agriculture technical agencies within our NAP technical working group. And that is a relationship that has been very strong, and we've really, I think, done some good work together, so we hope to continue that. I suppose I would end also by saying many of the questions that I think came from the floor to my colleague from the Adaptation Committee very much would be mirrored for the leg. Our mandate, the limits to our mandate are very similar. Our attempts to be flexible and to address those priority sectoral issues are we have different modalities and different ways of working, but really the spirit of collaboration is very much the same, albeit we have a slightly different focus group in that work. So I'll leave it there. Obviously my contacts are there, but of course, as I said, I'm happy to take questions now, and I look forward to the discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was also a very good example on what you're already doing on the field of agriculture and also in the broader terms. As you heard, she has to leave now, at least for the end of the day, so end of the morning session. So if there are any questions, I see European Union, you have the floor. Please have your questions to her. Michelle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator, and also thank you for this really interesting presentation, also the one before. I think it's really useful to have this here, and you also see that there's even interaction between the different bodies and questions asked. So one question would be, how do you see the contents of the 5 workshops that we had? Was there anything useful for your work in there? Or would you say the group would need to focus more on specific issues and develop them more? Because as you know, we have done 5 workshops, and there's reports on those workshops, and like, did your group look at those, read them, or was there no such interaction? Because I think that's also why this is useful, so that everybody gets aware of what different people in different fora are doing.
Let us take Uganda also, if you have a question, and then we take answers to both of your questions. Please, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Co-Facilitator, and I would like to thank the least developed countries expert group for the presentation. And I really want to probably build on the same question, that looking at the key elements that have been identified for action in the 5 workshops, I note very critically that the action needed should really be able to reach the decision makers in agriculture. Most of them, this sector, unfortunately, the decision makers on land, on how many trees to cut, how many trees to leave, lie mostly on the farmers, the people managing the landscape. And I think one of the elements that catalyzed this particular approach is that the message is not reaching them. The effort at the global level is appreciated, but for the agriculture sector, the message is not reaching them. And I think the point is we are trying to see how best can we create this link, how can we increase the connectivity between the global processes, the information, the knowledge, the technology, to get to these people. I expect that the least developed country expert group would take great interest in this issue, because I think they are dealing with the specific community that is most impacted, but also that is most in the dilemma how to access this information, technology, and tools. And therefore, I would really appreciate to what extent can we really improve this connectivity. And I would like to know, is there any process? I think we heard from the adaptation committee that they have the action plan, a work plan that is being under review. What process do we have under the least developed countries expert group that could actually consider any further guidance to integrate some of these issues? It would be very interesting for us to see how we can address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, and maybe Michelle, you would be able to respond to both of those questions, please.
Thank you so much for the questions. As ever, the most challenging one from the EU. That's great. The extent to which, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for all of my leg colleagues. The extent to which we have been through the report workshops and tried to align them with our work is frankly limited. We have discussed them at a very generic level in the technical working group, and our colleagues from FAO keep us focused to an extent, but no, and that is perhaps a piece of work, a conversation that we probably do need to have to see where there are gaps, where we have already addressed some of those priorities and where there are gaps. It does beg the question, though, which you've raised around breadth versus depth. And I think, you could argue that the broad, let's take the agriculture sector and provide some guidance. We have done that. If you start to get into greater granularity then around the agriculture sector, it does start to drift out of our mandate really within the leg, because our focus is right across all of the sectors. But I think my friend from Uganda has raised a really important point. So there are some issues that are specific to agriculture where I think we are doing some work, and perhaps we could and should consider doing more work. One area that I know my fellow leg member from Malawi and I are always droning on about is around stakeholder outreach. And that is, as you develop a NAP, there is a danger that it becomes the ivory tower instrument sitting in federal or national level ministries and so on, and how you reach out to citizens. And of course, a key stakeholder group is farmers, right? So how you engage with those people on the opportunities and the threats they face is a really important area. So I would definitely see stakeholder outreach, particularly to rural communities, as an area to consider. The other, this piece of work we're doing on vulnerable groups and ecosystems, to a large measure that reaches, rural communities reliant on vulnerable ecosystems, farmers for the most part. And so that is almost at the point of finalization. I have to check. I think it's actually finalized. So we would be interested to get your feedback about the extent to which it does add value to your work program, and where perhaps gaps might lie in the future. But as I said, to the extent that we can within our mandate, we're very much open and willing to find ways to weave in the agriculture work program into our work. How we can consider doing more within our work program is a matter for the parties, right? But we take our mandate from the least developed countries negotiating stream, and we have a work program. We have a rolling 2-year work program, which is always asking us to do more, always asking us to do country-specific training and regional-specific training and sector-specific training. So it is quite difficult for us to get that down to something manageable. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for your replies also. I think that was very illustrative, that on the one hand you are bounded by the mandate, but on the other hand it's up to parties to determine the mandate and further work for you, and you are open to collaborate and see the need for that one. So thank you very much on that. Good. And excellent questions. I think this is exactly what we are looking for, that we have this kind of exchange already at this stage. Now we need to move forward, and I have been advised by the Secretariat that we could continue in the following order. That next one would be the Executive Committee on the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage, and then we would have the representative of the Standing Committee on Finance, and then we would have the representative from the consultative group of experts. And if that does not fit to any of you, please come to us, so we will adjust. But if that's acceptable, we will move forward on this manner, and we have the Mr. Malcolm Rideout from representing the Executive Committee on Warsaw International Mechanism. Please, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I'm Malcolm Rideout. I'm a member, to give it the full title, of the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage Associated with Climate Change Impacts. So if nothing else, I take the prize for the longest title this morning. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you a little bit about the mechanism, which was founded under COP19, so we're now 5 years old. And it is there to facilitate action on and support about minimizing and averting loss and damage due to climate change. Now, these can be quick events like cyclones and floods and things like that, but they can also be slow onset events, which is things like sea level rise, ocean acidification, salinization, and all things like that. Many things, of course, which are very relevant to agriculture. And we're also thinking about losses with both economic and non-economic losses. And I'll talk a little bit later about the non-economic losses later, but just keep that in your mind, because I think that's a very important part of our work. So the committee, well, the mechanism, shall I say, just for short, I won't keep saying the title, it'll take too long, is to both enhance understanding, dialogue, and action and support across the whole thing, the spectrum of loss and damage. And the mechanism, as actually implemented by an executive committee, has 10 members from Annex 1 parties, 10 members from non-Annex 1 parties. And we are also helped very much by recruiting expert groups to assist us. And we're also blessed with a very lively set of observers who we also involve in our meetings. So our work is divided into work streams, and 5 work streams, and I'll just talk about those a little bit. So the first one is about slow onset events, and it's part of our 5-year rolling work plan. And obviously on slow onset events, there is a huge amount of information and what could be done and what the problems might be around that. So one of the things that we're doing is we have put together a database of over 160 initiatives on slow onset events. And also we have an expert group to look at what we might want to say on the data on that. And our idea is to actually commission a special edition of a journal or something like that to bring together all the research that might be relevant on slow onset events. The next work stream is looking about non-economic losses. And I think that this is an extremely important area. I mean, many disasters or losses and damages immediately send people scurrying to look at what the damage is in dollars or pounds or zloty or whatever it might be. But actually, that's often not the most important measure. If you burn down Beverly Hills, for example, the economic loss would be massive because people are quite well off, but they're all well insured, and most of them will probably get out of the way in time. The same could not be said of an informal settlement in a developing country, where a disaster could be devastating to families, and the loss of life and loss of health arguably is far more important than the mere loss of economic assets. And so that's something that very much occupies our minds, and it's something that we would like is a challenge to give the right prominence to, because it lacks any coherent, easily understandable measure, but that's an extremely important point. The next one is about risk management. We view the whole thing about loss and damage as, in terms of averting and minimizing it, certainly about risk management. And I think that effective management of risks in the future is going to be very important if we are going to deal with the threat of climate change effectively. So one of the things we have in this expert group, and the most important thing is, or one of the most interesting things, is a compendium on risk management approaches. I mean, our role we see as executive committee is very much as a facilitative function rather than actually carrying out any particular works, to bring in information and to help people to understand what can be done about loss and damage is extremely important. So we have a compendium of risk management initiatives which we put together, and there are some that are particularly relevant to agriculture. Here's some there. And I think we know that in terms of risk management, it's not all about managing when things have already gone wrong. It's trying to get ahead of the danger as well, because good information can certainly help farmers make better information, good decisions about planting. And one example, for example, from my own experience, is simply getting weather forecasts in a vernacular language rather than in technical language, and putting it out to farmers on a radio that they can understand makes a huge difference as to whether they waste their seed by planting at the wrong time or make a good decision. Another work stream we have is about human mobility. It's clear that climate change may force people to move, and is that they cannot continue their livelihoods where they are anymore. And in that we have pulled together a collaboration, and we have run a number of workshops, including with the International Organization on Migration, and had a look at what working to address some of the risks of displacement are. That we've got a report on that. The bare bones of it is in our report that is going to be submitted to this COP, and a fuller one is also on our website, and I commend that to you. Further work stream is about action and support. And action and support is, well, as Article 8 of the Convention points out, loss and damage covers many areas. It's sort of a bit of a cross-cutting thing, covering disaster risk reduction, adaptation, resilience building, risk response, all those kinds of things. So talking about loss and damage just as loss and damage sometimes is rather difficult, because it lacks a very precise definition. And therefore, we had the SUVA dialogue at the last SBs, where we shared information with a wide range of interlocutors as to what could practically be done in order to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage. And I think it's really important to bear in mind that when it comes to thinking about loss and damage, it is really important to get down to some of the details of what you actually mean in a particular situation, enable then to facilitate a good conversation about what you might need to do to facilitate action and support. I'm coming back now to risk management, because this is something that I'd like you all to try and give us some feedback on. We have what's called the Fiji Clearinghouse for Risk Transfer, which has pulled together a lot of evidence and knowledge about risk management. And you can ask it questions. It's got a function called Risk Talk in it, and there are a whole bunch of experts that have subscribed to this. And if you type in a question, you should get an answer. And maybe you don't even need to type in your question, because you'll have seen questions that people might have typed in before, and you might have a ready answer. So that is something that would be extremely good to have everyone have a look at. And we would love to have some feedback on that. And indeed, if you go on the mechanism's website, there are a large number of reports and information on loss and damage that illustrate our work, which is there to help to facilitate action on loss and damage. And again, if it's useful, let us know. If it's not useful, also let us know, so we can actually make sure that we serve you in thinking about action on loss and damage. So that's all I have, and there's the website, which I hope you'll now all be visiting as a matter of some priority, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, for your excellent presentation. And if there are now any questions, clarifying questions, please raise your flag. Okay, Kenya, thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that very excellent presentation. Yeah, the issue of risk management is very critical to Africa, particularly in the agriculture sector. And there have been a lot of efforts and pilots on weather-based index insurance. Some we have had successful outcomes, some not very useful, but one key message across is that it requires a lot of subsidy, because if it's not subsidized, then the premiums are very high, and therefore the smallholder farmers cannot access that, and therefore they cannot manage risks. I don't know whether it's within your mandate to try and see how we can overcome this challenge, so that it can it's a tool that can be used across board to manage risk, especially in the agriculture sector. Or is it something that you're not considering? You're considering the other insurance, which is not the weather based.
Thank you very much for the question. Maybe Malcolm, if you respond to that, please.
Thank you, co-facilitator. Yes, insurance, we're very well aware. It's something that we have discussed quite a lot. And it is clear that insurance is not a panacea, and it doesn't fix all problems. For those people who are not well off and who face frequent shocks, insurance is never going to be the answer. However, I think there are other mechanisms of risk finance and risk pooling that can be used in those situations. And I think that getting the mix of instruments right in anyone's situation is something that is going to, is not something which we can provide a simple prescription for. And therefore, in putting together our database on risk management approaches and thinking about how that can best be done, we seek to offer a sort of a wide set of examples and note that how these problems might well be solved. But I certainly agree with you that insurance is not a silver bullet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Uganda, you have a question, please.
Mr. Co-facilitator. I just want to actually build on a similar question and say that I think the challenge we see is that the scale and the impact, the losses and damage that that especially smallholder farmers have to experience is quite challenging to their livelihoods and also to food security in particular. I do believe that this is a relatively new body. However, I think there is a lot of possibility that there are systems, both coping systems and mechanisms that a wide range of communities worldwide have used to reduce losses, but also to cope with them. My question is, when I listened, I've not seen much in terms of a mechanism to exchange this information, lessons, networks for of this nature. And I believe that this would be very important especially for the region where I come from, but also to see how we can integrate very strongly learning and exchanges that can support this. My feeling is that we need once again to focus on how we can promote the experience sharing and knowledge, and I think this is something that we need to strengthen how agriculture can actually be more integrated in this process. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment and question. Malcolm, do you want to reflect on that, please? Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you. I agree, is all I can say. Some of the stuff that we have on our website is designed to try and increase the availability of information for users of it. That is something we'll strive to do more on. Obviously, these mechanisms work best the more people put into them, and the more they give us feedback. So I look forward to the offerings from the Warsaw mechanism improving with time as people get engaged. And hopefully what we'll be able to do is not necessarily do everything ourselves, but help people to be put together. So for example, the Risk Talk facility on our website enables people to directly connect to various experts who may be able to assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I was about to move forward. Kenya, do you still have one more question to Malcolm, please? And then we move forward, please, sir.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for coming back. A similar question to the one I asked SC. In one of the 5 workshops, we discussed about risk management. I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to look at what was discussed, and I think Drake made some reference to some of those ideas that emerged. The question would be, would you be ready to look at some of the outcomes from that workshop and ask yourself whether it is something that the mechanism will be willing to look at? And based on your mandate, is there additional recommendation or decision that you require from parties to enable you help us to deal and unpack the risk management tools that we're looking out under the Koronivia? That's the point we're looking at. We're trying to see how, for example, can parties work with you in order to further work on risk management in the agriculture sector, given it's a very critical area, and whatever means you're looking at agriculture, there will still be loss and damage.
Thank you for that question. And Malcolm, you have the floor, please.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's extremely important, and I think that the more the mechanism is empowered to sort of convene expert groups and take advice and input from a wide variety of actors, and therefore I would see that inputs from this process as to be very useful in terms of enhancing the offer that the mechanism has. And I'd see the mechanism as primarily a way of bringing together and disseminating those kinds of ideas as they are relevant to loss and damage. So certainly I would be very much in favour of that being developed. Not so much, I suppose, but concentrated, I think, on the technical inputs is what we would need to make sure that we make those available to a wider number of people as possible.
Thank you very much for your answer once again and all your inputs today. We need to move forward now, and as I said before, let us move now to look on the Standing Committee on Finance, and we have the representative of that committee, Mr. Matthias Frumeri. I hope I announced your name more or less correctly, my Finglish. Please, Matthias, you have the floor.
Thanks, co-facilitator, and good morning, colleagues. Happy to be here to represent the Standing Committee of Finance. My name is Matthias Frumeri. I work at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'll make a very brief presentation on our work. If we move to the next slide, thank you. We can see that the Standing Committee does not have a particular focus on specific themes, but as you can see, we're working on financing matters for the entirety of the needs which are being assessed. The committee was established already in Cancun and held its first meeting in Bangkok in 2012, and we just finished our 19th meeting earlier this in October in Bonn. So as you can see here, the SCF was established in order to improve coherence and coordination in the delivery of finance, climate finance, the work on rationalization of the financial mechanism, and not least the mobilization of financial resources as a whole, and as well measuring and reporting and verification of the support provided to developing country parties. Now, the two, I would say, sort of flagship products of the committee would be, on the one hand, the SCF Forum, which is then held annually, which we're planning now for the Forum of 2019, and the biennial assessment and overview of financial flows, which was released just a couple of days ago, will be presented tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and I hope you can find the details of the presentation on the UNFCCC website, and I hope to see many of you there in order to be able to also to go deeper into the report itself of 2018. And naturally, we, as the other constituted bodies, we would also report to the COP on how our mandate is being carried out, and that report will also be made public on the website. Now, when it comes to agriculture in particular, this very important subject, as I said initially, we have not there is no specific mandate to go into thematic areas as such, apart from a small mandate on forests, which was established a couple of years back. And so as such, the issue of agriculture has not been discussed in particular, but there was policy discussions held during the SCF forums, specifically in 2014 and 2015. In 2014, as you can see on the slide, there was a panel presentation related to mobilizing private sector finance in the agricultural sector. And in 2015, participants, as one of the conclusions of the forum, stressed the importance of ensuring coherence between forest finance and other relevant sectors. And making that point on policy coherence, I think that's one of the messages also from the biennial assessment, which then came out a couple of days ago, on the importance of actually of coherence across sectors, I think we as parties, we would need to encourage ourselves that working within our respective governments and administrations, that we make sure that whatever kind of policy areas would be important for our particular country would also then be manifested in both our NDCs and, of course, in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in general. Now, maybe that's a point, speaking particularly from the Swedish delegation, a point which is very close to our hearts on policy coherence in general, but then also the implementation of the SDGs. So that's something, of course, which we as national delegates will need to work within our own administrations to make sure that whatever kind of policy areas we wish to highlight, we also make those very clear within our national budget and planning cycles. Moving on then to the biannual assessment, in the 2018 BA, which was then released just a couple of days ago, you will see an overview of climate finance flows in different sectors, including estimates of public and private investment in sustainable agriculture, forestry, and other land issues. So if you dive into especially the technical report of, or the technical annex of the report, you will find figures which could be of interest to you. That being said, and a challenge which we have, and I guess you would find in many other committees as well, is lack of comprehensive global data sets, which would then be able to, where we would be able to present the kind of figures we would want to see in a more sort of in a more coherent approach. So that's something which we're also working with within the Standing Committee on Finance to encourage ourselves as parties and also other actors to move on to a situation where we have more comprehensive global data sets in order to be able to present more comprehensive findings. Yes, so I guess the presentations will also be made available, I guess, so you could dive into the information there as well. But you will find the whole BA available, of course, at the UNFCCC website, and then also, as I said, presented at an event tomorrow, Tuesday. I think I'll stop there and welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for your presentation. And actually, it seems to be like it's like a teaser to come to hear the real data and information tomorrow. So I think it's a good, very good in that respect also. Are there any questions that somebody would like to pose at this stage? Further information will be available tomorrow. That's what we all heard, and we should be able to join and listen then. I see Kenya, you have the flag up, so you have floor, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Now, I think it's clear that your mandate is not primarily on sectors, but coherence and thinking which are the opportunities for mobilizing climate finance that can support the climate change work. Now, from the context of the 1.5 degree report, special report that just came out, which identified key areas that we need to invest in if we have to remain there. And I think one of the areas is land, and largely is the Afolu sector. Is it possible? Is it something that the Standing Committee is looking at, that how can we look at opportunities to mobilize more resources to invest into those key sectors that have been identified in order to address the climate change, so that you're thinking outside in a manner that helps to align where the need is and where action needs to be done in that respect, and then of course that can easily direct more resources in those sectors. Is that something that you are considering, or it's completely out of, because I would have thought that would be one way by which we can look at that. And then two is, as you and I hope I'll have time to look at the report that you've just made reference to. But from your observation, if you look at the current investments in those primary sectors that are important for climate, both for adaptation and mitigation, are you convinced that we're in the right direction? And how do you see the work of Koronivia helping to inform the further engagement of the Standing Committee in its engagement on or its next plan of action?
Thank you for your question. I think we take the Uruguay and then you respond to questions of both countries, because we need to move forward in order to allow sufficient time also for the remaining presentations. So Uruguay, you have the floor, please, madam.
Thank you very much. So every country has different strategies to achieve a low carbon development in agriculture, while facing the challenge of safeguarding food security, as you know. And those different strategies are captured in the NDCs. But we consider that not only those projects that aim to absolute reduction of emissions in agriculture should be considered and supported, and that it is essential in our vision that constituted bodies are aware that emission intensity and net emissions reduction are also significant goals in agriculture. So having said that, my concrete question is how can we ensure that those different approaches to low emission development carbon in agriculture are not a constraint to access the means of implementation and therefore to achieve the goals in the NDCs? Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for your question. And Matthias, if you are able to respond to those, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, colleagues, for those questions. If I start off with the question from our Kenyan colleague, on the if the SCF is considering recommendations as to where investments should be channeled, if I understood correctly. I mean, I would say that the simple answer is no. That's sort of not within our mandate to actually look into where or make recommendations as to specific sectors in relation to each other. The mandate is more to present, as you said yourself, to present the whole picture, to see where do we see flows are going, and try to facilitate the reporting of the flows in order for other actors to get as comprehensive picture as possible as to where the flows are. And now, if I could come to your second question, and also the question from our colleague from Uruguay, I think that would also, it relates to, again, coming back to policy coherence, and I think the choice for all parties to make their own plans to see what kind of measures do we need to take in my particular country in order for us to reach the kind of goals that we set out ourselves to do, and how do we achieve the goals in our NDCs. And of course, based on that, we would have to make nationally also our own decisions on financing those goals, and how do we mobilize national resources in order to be able to reach those goals. And of course, when there is after the discussion on national resources, there is of course also the possibility of international climate finance coming into play in various degrees, depending on sort of what countries we are discussing. So also with the question from our Kenyan colleague, if we're going in the right direction, I mean, that could be an issue which might be discussed within the SCF as well, as to make sort of the assessment of where we are in when it comes to climate finance in general. So I think as an SCF member, I shouldn't be sort of expressing any particular views on that. But again, invite you to come to the report presentation tomorrow, and we can have a further discussion on that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your answer and explanation. And as I said, we need to still move forward. We have 4 more presentations on the pipeline and 1 more hour left. So I cordially invite next is the representative of the consultative group of experts, Mrs. Marianna Kasprunchik. I hope that was more or less identifiable. Please, madam, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to deliver this presentation on behalf of the consultative group of experts on national communications from parties not included in Annex 1 to the Convention. That is the long name of the group. CGE is the short one. I will try to address the three guiding questions mentioned at the outset. But first, let me share some background information about the CGE. The CGE was established by COP5 in 1999 as an expert group to assist developing parties in improving their national communications, and since COP19, their biennial annual update reports too. The CGE is also responsible for the training of experts nominated to the UNFCCC roster of experts to conduct the technical analysis of BURs under the International Consultation Analysis process. The CGE comprises 24 experts, 5 members from each of the 3 regions of developing countries, that is Africa, Asia and Pacific, and the Latin American and the Caribbean. There are also 6 members from Annex 1 parties, 1 member from each of the international organizations with relevant experience in providing technical assistance to developing countries in the preparation of national communications and BURs. These are UNDP, UNEP, and IPCC. And the members are nominated for a period of 2 years and serve a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. So as I said before, COP5 established the CGE with the objective of improving the process of preparation of national communications from developing countries. In 2002, in recognition of its excellent role played in assisting developing parties improve the process of preparation of national communications, COP8 decided to continue its mandate for 5 years and revise its terms of reference. Under this mandate, the objective of the CGE was to improve the process of preparation of second and subsequent national communications by providing technical advice and support to developing countries. This mandate expired in 2007. Then in 2009, COP15 reconstituted the CGE for 3 years and mandated the group to develop a work program. At its first meeting, which was held in 2010. And in 2012, COP18 extended for a term of 1 year the CGE, including its current membership. In 2013, COP19 continued the CGE for 5 years and included in its mandate the providing technical assistance and support for the preparation of BURs. The current mandate of CGE expires this year, and as you may be aware, the review of its terms of reference is included in the agenda of this session of the SBI. In 2014, the CGE developed a 5-year work program which focuses on 5 key strategic priorities. I'm not sure you are able to read the 5 strategic priorities, so I will mention them. The first one is to build capacity of developing country parties to facilitate the implementation of the measurement, reporting, and verification arrangements under the Convention. This is to say the NATCOMs and the BURs. And under this priority, actions of the CGE include conducting needs analysis, developing, designing, and delivering training materials, conducting hands-on training workshops, using innovative tools to reach out to a larger pool of experts, such as webinars and e-learning courses, and designing the training program for the team of technical experts, the TTE, that undertake the technical analysis of the BURs under the International Consultation Analysis process. The second priority of the CGE relates to enhancing the sustainability of developing parties' reporting processes, again, the NATCOMs and the BURs processes. And actions include developing tools and guidance materials on setting up and enhancing robust institutional arrangements that function on a continuous basis, and enhancing access to financial, technical, and capacity building resources, and identifying potential linkages between national development policies and strategies to address adaptation and mitigation actions. The third priority is to ensure the availability of resources and optimal working arrangements for the operation of the CGE. The fourth one relates to enhance collaboration and cooperation with other global initiatives, including actions such as developing collaboration and cooperation with other expert groups and constitute bodies under the Convention, and developing collaboration and cooperation with key global initiatives. Finally, the fifth priority relates to enhancing communication and outreach, and actions included in this priority are relating to identifying networks to collaborate with to enhance an effective and efficient interaction with stakeholders, developing communication products, targeting experts and global networks in developing countries, and using existing web-based platforms to access to information and guidance on preparing national communications and BUR. All these, you can find more information on CGE materials and activities at the CGE website. So, in this framework, the CGE has provided technical advice and support as mandated to developing parties on greenhouse gases inventory systems, mitigation actions and their effects, vulnerability and adaptation assessment, BUR preparations, and training materials for the technical team of experts. Preparation of training materials for the elaboration of the NATCOMs and the BURs has been one of the key tasks of the CGE, taking into account the evolving needs of developing countries to this end. And as I said, the materials, all the materials are on the CGE website. Another key task has been the organization of hands-on training workshops on the issues I mentioned before. Now, the work of the CGE related to agriculture has a focus on three main areas. This is vulnerability and adaptation, mitigation, and greenhouse gas inventory. On vulnerability and adaptation, training materials were developed covering implications of climate change on agriculture. These materials include methodologies, tools, and associated data collection and management that are commonly used in the agricultural sector for vulnerability and adaptation assessments. This year, the regional hands-on training workshop on vulnerability and adaptation organized by the CGE included a sectoral session providing an in-depth look at the drivers of change in agriculture. This sectoral session was conducted in collaboration with the FAO. On mitigation, On mitigation, also training materials were developed by the CGE on agriculture and covering emissions sources and drivers, trends, and GHG implications, key barriers and overcoming barriers, and policies and measures. There are also case studies included in those materials. Last year, the CGE, in collaboration with FAO also conducted a webinar on global GHG mitigation potential in agriculture. This webinar focused on the agriculture sector within the climate change context to reduce emissions and to adapt to climate change. And it also covered reporting information regarding agriculture within the national communications and the BURs. On greenhouse gas inventory, training materials on the IPCC guidelines on agriculture are agriculture, forestry, and land use, AFOLU, are available. And also the CGE participated as resource persons to workshops organized by the Secretariat on the IPCC guidelines. Finally, provided the CGE mandate is extended during this SBI session, and regarding how the work of the CGE can help the work related to agriculture in the future. It may be through CGE's on-the-ground engagement with developing countries, such as workshops, webinars, and surveys that we conduct. We are aware there's a continued need and demand to enhance the national capacities of developing country parties to prepare information for reporting on agriculture sector as part of the implementation of the existing MRV arrangements, again, the preparation of national communications and BURs. The CGE may also continue to provide technical advice and support on reporting related matters on agriculture, and also to collaborate with other constituted bodies to provide integrated technical advice and support to developing country parties on matters related to agriculture. Thank you. I'm sorry, I think the last slide is missing with the information of the website and contact data. Maybe we can share an updated presentation to upload it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. Very many thanks to you. I presume that the Secretariat will update the correct presentation on the website. So while waiting that one, if there are some questions coming now from any member country, please raise your flag. I do not see any. So may I now suggest that we take actually two presentations following each other, and then we would have the possibility for questions. we could take the Technology Executive Committee as well as the Climate Technology Center and the Network Advisory Board in that regard. And then there would be the questions, you can please, if you hold those until those two presentations have been made, and then we will have the possibility, you will have the possibility to raise your questions. So from the representative of the Technology Executive Committee, Mr. Igor Onotchuk. Please, Igor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator. Good morning or good afternoon already, colleagues. I'm glad to present today what this Technology Executive Committee had been doing and is doing in agriculture. Okay, so let me first briefly introduce you to the TEC. And the Technology Executive Committee is a policy component of the technology mechanism, which was established in 2010, which is comprising of 20 experts of members. It undertakes analysis and provides policy recommendations to enhance climate technology development and transfer. It also promotes cooperation and collaboration on climate technologies. So briefly about key outputs of the Technology Executive Committee. First, TEC provides TEC policy briefs, which called TEC briefs. Also, it provides executive summaries, guidance, knowledge products, other papers. And also one of the outputs is key messages or recommendations to be considered on the COP. And how this usually is done, for example, in the context of innovation, the TEC conducted a workshop on national systems of innovation in 2014. Then a TEC brief in 2015 was published on this topic, and then TEC provide key messages on national system on innovation to the COP21. TEC usually undertake work with its rolling work plan, and in this year, a rolling work plan is finishing or already finished. It was developed for 2016-2018. It was organized in 3 work streams. So first one is analyze technology issues and provide policy recommendations, which had outcomes of accessing to technology analysis, guidance, policy recommendations, roadmaps, etc. And then examples of deliverables. There were thematic dialogues, TEC briefs. Also, TEC delivered key messages to COP with regard to linking TNA, which is technology needs assessment, to NAPS and NDC processes. The second work stream was catalyzing support and facilitating and promoting technology cooperation and partnership to scale up implementation and actions. So that was with particular aim to support to accelerate the implementation of technology policy recommendations, action plans, programs, and projects. So under this stream, there was work with GCF and GEF, engaging with high-level climate champions. Also, TEC was contributing to TAP process, which is a technical examination process. And also, TEC was broadly communicating with other stakeholders. Also there was a third work stream, which is work in collaboration with the CTCN to promote coherence and synergy within the technology mechanism. Since technology mechanism consists of 2 main branches, Technology Executive Committee, which is policy branch, and CTCN, which is more executive branch. And under this stream, we've been trying to promote this coherence within the technology mechanism. With regard to how the work was organized, there is 6 thematic areas of work under the TEC. which are adaptation, climate technology financing, emerging and cross-cutting issues, innovation and RD&D, mitigation and technology needs assessment. Also, you see some examples of outputs or outcomes of the TAC under these thematic areas. So basically, these previous slide of work streams and thematic areas are really connected with each other and really dependent on what TAC decides, or actually what TAC have from the COP, what messages came from the parties, and then TAC decides how to organize best its work on the next rolling work plan. With regard to engagement with stakeholders, TAC tries to engage with broad range of stakeholders, including NGOs, intergovernmental and UN organizations, countries, experts, and other stakeholders. With the aim of to communicate and collaborate with other UNFCCC bodies, TAC frequently use different tools like conference calls, invites representatives on its meetings, or participate in joint meeting sessions. For example, in March 2018, actually, TAC had joint meeting with EXCOM, which is Executive Committee on Warsaw Mechanism on Loss and Damage. With regard to agriculture, the TAC had considering its work more in adaptation technologies or adaptation work stream, which is focusing on agriculture and water sectors. Why particularly these two sectors? The first explanation is these two, let's say, sectors are really close or interlinked between each other. For example, 75% world population engaged in agriculture activities, and agriculture accounts for 70% of global freshwater withdrawals. Also, a close link is underlined in technical needs assessment technologies for adaptation. Almost 40% of countries identified need for improved agricultural practices, which includes irrigation, what means that in the TNA countries explain this as agriculture, however, it's really connected to water management. And also, accordingly to what parties demanded in its technical needs assessment, almost 84% of parties recognized agriculture of high priority needs of technologies for to be delivered to the country, and 77% is required for water management. In 2014, TAC produced TAC Brief, which is TAC Brief number 4, focusing on the adaptation in agriculture sector. It highlights lessons learned, identifies examples of agricultural technologies, their sustainability, enablers and barriers, outlines the roles of stakeholders, and offer recommendations for policy formulation. So some of the key findings from this TAC brief. Contribution of agriculture to local and national economies requires sustainable adaptation supported by appropriate technologies. Technologies in agriculture enhance resilience to climate change and can offer co-benefits of adaptation and mitigation. The need for collaboration, communication, and appreciation to ensure that the technologies introduced are appropriate. So, logically, there were also key messages delivered to the COP20 from that TAC brief. And these were prioritization of technologies for adaptation that enhance resilience should take into consideration vulnerability and adaptation assessments undertaken during the NEP process. Technologies for adaptations that have mitigation co-benefits should be identified, encouraged, and promoted. The integration of hardware, software, and orgware is necessary and should be supported by appropriate policies. In 2017, TEC produced a tech brief which was focusing on South-South and triangular cooperation on technologies for adaptation in the water and agriculture sectors. Why this tech brief was produced? There is a need to better understand the potential of South-South and triangular cooperation in the context of adaptation to climate change. Pretty frequently, technologies and expertise in developing countries are more likely to be attuned to similar geoclimatic, market size, end users level, and other conditions. And also, it was seen as a really useful and useful tool to two most prioritized sectors by countries' needs identified in technology need assessment, agriculture, and water. So some of the key findings are South-South and triangular cooperation is particularly important for adaptation, given the prominence of the adaptation of knowledge for adaptation. There are examples of successful South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in both the agriculture and water sector. Such collaboration is within reach for all countries which has similar conditions. The adoption of the 2030 agenda and the entry into force of the Paris Agreement bring opportunities for countries to use South-South and triangular cooperation to advance the implementation of this framework. The TEC also produced a paper compilation of good practices, knowledge sharing, and practical learning, which focuses on cooperation on adaptation technologies, including agriculture sector, software and hardware importance on adaptation context, and unique experiences of countries, how countries have shared knowledge and had hands-on learning from each other. The main goal, the main aim of producing this paper is to share some knowledge which is limited in accessibility, or some countries express this. And also there is an example of South-South and triangular cooperation you see in the corner, initiative of 7 Middle East and North Africa countries, which is seen pretty useful and successful. With regard to what TEC is going to do in 2019, the TEC will continue to support countries with climate technology policy issues as guided by parties. And also it is a really great momentum to be here and to hear some thoughts, feedbacks, ideas from the parties, since TEC will meet in 2019 in March, and it will be developing its new rolling work plan for 2019 and 2021, I believe. So it is really great momentum for having inputs to the TEC to be considered and to be put into rolling work plan in 2019 for following 3 years. With regard to what TEC also could do or also was doing with regard to agriculture, there is a work which is done by the TEC and also in close collaboration with the CTCN on mapping barriers and enabling environments from TNAs, NDCs, and CTCN technical assistance. And CTCN is feeding TEC with a lot of valuable information with regard to what parties identifying in their TNAs and NDCs, which are barriers, enablers, and then the TEC could consider how it might be, how these might be shared with broad range of parties. I think I will stop it here, and also I encourage you to go to our website, which is TTClear, to find a lot of materials, useful materials, and I'm glad to respond for questions.
Thank you very much, Igor. And as I told before, maybe we would benefit all if we take also the Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN Advisory Board, Madam Maija Sesvaratse. My apologies for my bad spelling. And then please hold your possible questions also to Igor, and we would take those together. Please, Maija.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator, and good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Maija Sesvaratse, and my surname is usually complicated to pronounce, and I'm used to it. I'm pleased to be here and to join you today for this workshop on behalf of the CTCN and its advisory board. The CTCN and its partners have undertaken a great work related to the agriculture, and I'm happy to share some of these highlights to you today. Before going to the scope itself and to the sector, the CTCN is the technology arm of the technology mechanism. It is guided by the advisory board and is working closely with the technology executive committee. CTCN is mandated to accelerate the deployment of climate-related technologies and meet the expressed needs of the developing countries. The CTCN was created in COP16 in Cancun in 2010, and it's operational since 2013. The center is co-hosted by the UN Environment and UNIDO, and with a consortium partners of 12 consortium partners. It operates through the 160 focal points, climate focal points from all over the world. Oops. Our network has 463 members in 80 countries, and 106 of these members have specific expertise related to the agriculture. And in the map, you can see the origins of our members. When it comes to the core sections of the CTCN, we are providing three types of services. These are the technical assistance, knowledge sharing, and capacity building, and collaboration and networking. The agriculture is the sectorial focus both for the mitigation and for the adaptation. This presentation will particularly look at the provision of technical assistance, but also will show some examples of the capacity building and knowledge sharing in the field of agriculture, as well as the ways in which CTCN can help advancing the developing country priorities related to the agriculture. The CTCN is primarily service offering is the provision of technical assistance, broadly broken with the three categories. We provide fast technical assistance, which is usually delivered by the international expert advice. It can be remotely or with brief country missions. However, the majority of our technical assistance are the typical technical assistance, which is around from 6 to 12 months. It costs approximately $150,000 to deliver. The third part is also that we partner in country with the focal points of the Green Climate Fund to access the GCF readiness funding, which is slightly larger scale investments, and it's including also for the agriculture depending on the country priorities. For the distribution of technical assistance requests, the CTCN is a country-driven mechanism that has received around 223 requests for the technical assistance through the 87 country focal points. This assistance can take as many forms as you see on this chart. The assistance provided by our expert partners ranges from assessing the viability of established technologies, to establishing legal and policy frameworks, to helping to remove upstream barriers and to promote the investments in climate-friendly approaches. The support to climate-smart agriculture is embedded across the CTCN technical assistance portfolio. As you can see on the chart, the requests, 54% of the requests were related to the mitigation, 32 to the adaptation, and 14 are the cross-cutting, including both. The 52 requests related specifically to agriculture, including 34 on reducing the vulnerability and increasing the adaptive capacity. Support is provided for modern and traditional technologies and practices. The key stakeholders here include the farmers, gender, youth, local communities, and as well as the indigenous people. These interventions all have important social, economic, and environmental co-benefits, and also include the ecosystem-based approaches. This chart provides an overview of the technical assistance requests that CTCN has received related to the agriculture. As you can see, the biggest portions of agriculture requests are related to the sustainable agriculture, as well as the development of agro-meteorological forecasting systems. But we also received the requests related to the mitigation, including the agricultural waste to energy and use of the renewable energy for the agriculture, such as water pumping and crop drying and storage. We have been envisaged in the designing of the ecological response and restoration platform against the 5 for silvopastoral systems, the prioritization of agricultural practices and technologies, and the design of monitoring systems and GIS-based tools for the water management. If we go to the capacity building related to the agriculture, in addition to ensuring that our technical assistance includes the capacity building component, we engage actively in the capacity building activities very broadly. We host webinars on the agriculture related topics, which is publicly available to the website of the ctcn.org. We create an incubator program for the least developed countries and small island developing states to develop technology roadmaps such as the conservation of the agriculture. We have developed a series of modules in supporting to the access to the Green Climate Fund, including for scale level requests for the agriculture. Our regional training sessions have included trainings on climate technologies to enhance and monitor terrestrial sequestrations of the carbon. The CTCN maintains a knowledge database accessible with its website. It's including around 10,000 publications, case studies, tutorials, tools, and videos. The website is searchable by a variety of the parameters, and it also includes the extensive details related to each of our technical assistance interventions. It's not moving. Can I move on the next slide? Oh, okay. So, and as a summary, CTCN directly support the developing country climate priorities related to the agriculture, covering a wide range of the topics and types of assistance. The capacity building is integrated in all CTCN technical assistance to ensure the sustainability of the agriculture and food systems. The work is implemented by our large network and expert organizations throughout the worldwide. It's collaboration with the national partners and experts, as well as with the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC. The knowledge sharing is a key to enable learning and possible replication across the countries, and agriculture can be supported in an integrated manner and closely linked because it's closely linked to the multiple SDGs. To look forward, to feed 2 more billion people by 2015, the food production will need to increase by the 50% globally, and nearly it needs to be doubled in the developing countries. The situation is even complicated if we take into account the impacts of the climate change on the agriculture. Nourishing more people with nurturing the planet will be the key and the monumental challenge, but it can be achieved by transforming the food and agricultural systems and shifting it to the more sustainable way, to diversify the consumption and production, improving the governance and securing the political will to act. The use of climate technologies can, without any doubt, accelerate the entailment of these goals. The CTCN can support by the enhancement of the agricultural and rural development through the identification of appropriate technologies that makes agriculture resilient and climate friendly. It can help in the conceptualization, design, development, evaluation and application of innovative ways to use the use of range of technologies in rural domain with a primarily focus of the agriculture. The CTCN is a technology neutral broker. It can step in, assess the needs, provide recommendations and appropriate on the appropriateness of the sound technologies and the solutions to the climate change problems. CTCN can assess and provide key recommendations in increasing or decreasing or removing the market barriers and creating the enabling environments for the effective and efficient mainstreaming of the climate technologies. We can assess the feasibility of a range of technology options, making it easier and less riskier for the public and private sector investors to participate in. The CTCN is a small but the partnership-focused organization and is happy to collaborate with other development partners, UN agencies, bilateral and multilateral agencies. And we look forward to the rest of this workshop and to continuing to the way forward. And thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to respond.
Thank you very much, Maya, for excellent presentation. And maybe if now there are questions to any of those two presentations on tech and CTCN, to Igor or Maya, please raise your flag if there are any questions on technology transfer. Yes, madam, if you want to, if you identify yourself and then you can put forward questions to these two presentations. Please, madam.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex and I'm from Yongo Agriculture Working Group. And my question was directed to the tech presentation. When you were addressing increase of production by 60% to feed the world population, we were wondering if you're also considering technologies that to answer food security, not only focusing on food production, but also, for example, on food waste, a reduction of food waste and losses, and accessibility. Thank you.
If I take also the question from Kenya, and then I ask the Igor and Maya to respond, and then, okay, I take Kenya, and then maybe please, Kenya, you have floor.
Thank you very much, Tech and CTCN. I think that the technology mechanism is a very critical mechanism for agriculture. Because even in, if you recall our discussions under Article 4.1C, it's a very critical area. I've listened carefully. Maybe I missed it. Has CTCN, for example, worked with any party or any country and facilitated technology transfer or technology development and transfer in the agriculture sector? Because that's something that we would like to see from the CTCN. I know you supported development of a CSA manual in Zimbabwe. Really, I think we need to do more than that. So the question I'm asking is, you are aware of the topics that the 5 topics that we discussed. A large part of them, the last 2, dealt with agricultural technologies and agricultural practices, and a large of them require that technology development and transfer. If you look at the topics now that are under Koronivia, particularly from B to F, all those may require technology development and transfer. The question is, has TEC and CTCN, how can TEC and CTCN consider the outcomes of the 5 workshops, which are very clear in some aspects of the type of technologies and that we're looking at, and looking at the topics currently under the Koronivia, to what extent can CTCN and TEC work with parties to see how we can realize that? And finally, and this may apply to all the constituted bodies, having presented your work based on your mandate, and then having heard what has been discussed in the 5 workshops and what is likely to be discussed in the remaining other 5 or so workshops, topics, and many more topics that may come under Koronivia, how do you see yourself working with parties, and particularly this joint work on agriculture? And what mechanism do we communicate to you for you to take action? Because as parties, yes, we have a framework through which we work with you individually, but under SBI Substa joint work, how do we send a message to you as a constituted body to incorporate or consider the topics or the outcomes that we have discussed under this joint work? I think that is the fundamental question that we are discussing in modalities. Because if we don't address it, then you'll come and present to us what you've done, and it has no relevance to the topics that we have identified or we are under discussion. That's the point. How have you been able to look at this? If so, how do you consider incorporating? If not, how can we signal? Which mechanism do we use? Do we go through a recommendation? Do we go through a COP decision encouraging you to consider whatever is in it? That for us is very important.
Thank you very much for the question. And maybe the last one is something that we continue to discuss and consider collectively. I think it's something that it may be too much asking to only the representatives constituted bodies to try to find the answer. I think it's something for us to collectively. If you allow, I would still to take EU, and then if you remember the questions and comments, you may try to reply collectively, because we still have one more presentation. So EU still, you have the floor, and then I cordially invite to provide response to the questions and comments made. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator. We actually got quite short question. Our colleague that was introducing the TEC Executive Committee was talking about hardware, software, and orgware, and maybe it would be good for the audience just to shortly explain what that is, what the different components represent. And then secondly, on the CTCN, it was very interesting to see that there's a huge database with articles and knowledge you can look up that is already online, as has been explained. And we had a long discussion on if we wanted to put up something like a SharePoint ourselves. So maybe by getting all this information here will help us to further develop our discussion on that topic, and maybe see that we can use many things that are already done. So it's very valuable information. Thank you.
Very good. So maybe Igor, if you start first on the questions and comment made, please.
Yep. Thank you everyone for the questions. I will try to respond as much as I can. With regard to civil society's question on focusing on more technologies on production rather than securing or focusing on food security. Well, the tech taking into account food security and other aspects, it's not excluding any aspect of producing food, and that, well, basically that means that we strive to have more to have technologies which could offer more food with not insecuring any other aspects of producing food, of agriculture. I will leave some questions to the CTCN with regard to any examples of transferring technologies to agriculture, since tech has mandate to have more political branch. With regard to how countries can contribute to tech work or how messages can be sent to the tech, well, basically the first messages tech receives is through the country's NDCs, national technical needs assessment reports and action plans, which are then countries developed in the end of TNA process. The tech sees clear messages from these two, let's say, reports, and countries identify their own let's say, issues or barriers and also enablers, and tech tries to summarize it and maybe provide some recommendations to other countries which may face the same barriers and try to overcome them. Also tech, I forgot to mention, also this year tech representatives were taking part in climate weeks. I remember it's called, I think it was in Africa and also in Asia region, and it is part of the tech work of communicating with different stakeholders and trying to send messages and try to see some feedback. Of course, it is a bit limited in capacity in personal capacity of tech members, but as well in funding capacities. But this is work which is done, and tech tries to do its best. With regard to how these topics of Koronivia decision could be considered in the tech work, as I mentioned, in this March or next year, in the March, tech will be developing its rolling work plan, and well, I see that there might be messages or recommendations to the tech that tech might consider in its rolling work plan, and having flexibility in organizing its work in thematic areas or work streams. It might be something considered under attack, that there is a need to do something specifically for agriculture. Then we can discuss it in the tech with tech members. And with regard to how modalities recommendations might be sent to bodies, well, that's that's a difficult question, since I've been as a delegate member and also was considering that. I don't. Maybe it's a legal question to the Secretariat. Usually, we receive recommendations delivered by the COP, and then tech considers it as a recommendation, as a need to consider something. And then tech during its meetings twice per year considering it, and if there is a urgent need to adjust rolling work plans, then tech adds something. So that means that producing a plan for next 2 years, 2-3 years, is not something which cannot be adjusted. And with regard to EU's question of hardware and hardware, that was that was a message from compilation of good practices, knowledge sharing and practical learning on adaptation with respect to South-South and triangular cooperation. I think that there are some pretty concrete examples, but I think that the main, let's say, message is that there are software which may help countries to try to understand what adaptation measures might be the most beneficial for their own country. And with regard to orgware, I think it's more connected to, let's say, institutional arrangements, legal arrangements, which party may do with regard to producing adaptation measures or trying to compile a plan to do some adaptation measures. So I think it's, from my part, it's all.
Thank you very much, Igor. And then Maya, if you still remember the questions I'm able to provide. Please, Maya.
Yes, sure. I will start with the UNGO representative. Partly my colleague already responded. However, when it comes to the technologies only for production or reducing the food waste, when experts were making these calculations, it is primarily focused on the food production and from the business as usual scenario usually. Of course, it could be indicated whether the waste reduction can be included in these scenarios, but so far it is this way, as I know. Two questions to the Kenya. There was two parts of the questions. First was if the citizen worked with anyone to facilitate the technology transfer. As I reported in my presentation, we had around 54 requests, which was related specifically to the agriculture, and including 34 of them are about the adaptation, namely for the reducing vulnerability and increasing the adaptive capacity. So yes. But if your question was related to whether the CTCN is purchasing particular technologies and transferring to the developing countries, then it's no, because this is out of our mandate. If it's okay for you. It's also how do we see working with the countries and how countries can reach the CTCN and maybe to add additional items for the mandate. We are the country-driven mechanism, and whatever country needs and requests from the CTCN is trying to, within its network members, is trying to support properly. However, if you refer to the UN convention mechanism, we have the COP guidance, and we have the technology framework, which is under the negotiation of this COP, and the technology framework will guide the CTCN and tech for the long-term vision. So here you could contribute during the process. For the EU question, it was not a question, probably it was more suggestion. Yeah, so we are open for any kind of cooperation, and we can discuss it also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maya, also to your response, short responses. We still have one more presentation left, but don't worry, even though that they are turning the air conditioning in the room, and at least it's getting a little bit cold here, the room is reserved a little bit longer. So our intention is not to prolong intentionally, but we believe that it is important that we allow proper presentation to the Paris Committee on the Capacity Building, and we are lucky to have Madam Rita Mishan to be with us. Please, Madam, you have the floor, and I cordially invite you still to stay in the room, because we believe that there is a wealth of information to all of us still. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this invitation, and on behalf of the Paris Committee for Capacity Building, I would like to start by saying that the committee very much welcomes the opportunity to exchange views and ideas with the key stakeholders and consider all relevant issues related to the topics agreed under the Koronivia Joint Work on Agricultural Roadmap. It is a great opportunity for the PCCB to share what we are doing and where we see potential for action and collaboration in the context of the Rolling Work Plan 2017-2019 and beyond. I have heard all previous presentations of other constituted bodies under the Convention and their undertaking related to the issues of agriculture. This will hopefully help us identify interlinkages and gaps that enable us to harmonize future activities in the areas of work. While the PCCB is a body that just became operational in 2017 and we have not yet undertaken work on the issue of agriculture, we believe that our mandates and rolling work plan would offer a number of avenues and contributing to the work on this important matter. I will begin my presentation with an overview of our aim and mandates and working role plan, and will then introduce some ideas on how the PCCB may be able to support the work that we are doing here today. The Paris Committee on Capacity Building was created in 2015 and aims to address current and emerging gaps and needs in implementing capacity building in developing countries and further enhance capacity building efforts. The PCCB is expected to play a key role in ensuring coherence and coordination in capacity building activities under the Convention. Our committee consists of 12 members who represent developed and developing countries. We meet once each year and regularly report to the SBI on our progress and activities. An important part of our work is the analysis of climate capacity building issues and the development of sensible policy recommendations to support countries enhancing climate action. For the years 2017 and 2019, our focus area is capacity building activities for the implementation of national determined contributions. As mentioned earlier, we are relatively a new committee, and so far we've had only 2 meetings in 2017 and 2018 in May, both in May. The PCCB has been tasked with overseeing and managing the 2016-2020 Capacity Building Work Plan, launched by COP21, which encompasses 9 areas: increasing synergies and avoiding duplication with the constituted bodies under the Convention, identifying gaps and needs, promoting the development of tools and methodologies for implementation, fostering global, regional, national, and subnational collaboration, identifying and collecting good practices, challenges, experiences, and lessons learned, enhancing country ownership, strengthening capacity at national, regional, and subnational level, promoting dialogue, coordination, collaboration, coherence among processes and initiatives under the Convention, and providing guidance to the Secretariat on the enhancement of the capacity building portal. In addition, COP22 requested the PCCB, when implementing the 2016-2020 work plan, to address a number of additional areas, including cross-cutting issues such as gender responsiveness, human rights, and indigenous peoples' knowledge. Outcomes of the 3rd review of the implementation of the framework for capacity building in the developing countries, previous work on indicators for capacity building, linkages with other constituted bodies under the Convention and the Paris Agreement, synergies for enhanced collaboration with institutions outside the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and ways of enhancing reporting on capacity building activities. Based on our aim and mandates, we adopted a rolling work plan for the period 2017-2019. As I mentioned earlier, the focus area is capacity building activities for the implementation of NDCs. The implementation is supported through the thematic PCCB working groups focused on 4 areas: strengthening linkages with the constituted bodies and relevant processes and initiatives under and outside the Convention, cross-cutting issues such as gender responsiveness, human rights, and indigenous peoples' knowledge, enhancing the capacity building portal, and identifying capacity gaps and needs. Information on those 4 working groups are available in the webpage. In May of this year, the PCCB had its 2nd meeting. While on the first meeting, we still focus on becoming operational, for example, adopted rules and procedures, working modalities at the first meeting. Our second meeting was heavily focused on making progress on substance. With regard to the implementation of its rolling work plan, we, for example, agreed to develop a communication and stakeholder engagement strategy and resource mobilization strategy, to establish a vision and action plan for each PCCB working group, to collaborate with the Marrakesh Partnership in the context of capacity building and climate action, to continue our collaboration with non-party stakeholders, including in the context of organization of the Capacity Building Day at COP24, to identify options to strengthen the Durban Forum, including through regional dialogues, to address the issue of loss and damage in our rolling work plan for 2017-2019 in the context of activities of our working groups, to continue to provide guidance to the Secretariat to enhance the capacity building portal by implementing the action plan of Working Group 3, to conduct a national level pilot exercise on NDC implementation related to capacity gaps and needs. The outcomes of this exercise will feed into the compilation and synthesis report of the PCCB, including recommendations to the COP, and may also be used for development of other products such as guidelines, tools on how to conduct capacity needs and assessments in the context of NDC implementation. Concerning our annual focus area, we have agreed, among other things, to enhance our collaboration with operation entities of the financial mechanism, the constituted bodies of the convention, and other stakeholders, in order to promote the implementation of NDCs, to recognize and continue to address gaps and needs related to cross-cutting issues such as human rights, gender responsiveness, and indigenous peoples' knowledge in the context of implementation of NDCs. As I mentioned earlier, the PCCB has not worked on the issue of agriculture to this date. However, as a committee, we consider capacity building on agriculture and climate change a very important topic, also with respect to supporting the implementation of NDCs in the focus area of 2018-2019. We believe that there are a number of entry points that the PCCB can accomplish to support working on agriculture. On the next slides, we have a listed of number ideas of potential activities that the PCCB could organize or support in accordance to these particular mandates. This list is not exhaustive. We are open to brainstorm further on additional areas of the PCCB that the PCCB could support. Another core mandate is increasing synergies and avoiding duplication with the constituted bodies under the convention. The PCCB could implement collaborative activities with other constituted bodies. Besides joint events, we could, for example, explore options for developing a joint policy brief with the TEC and SEF relating to means of implementation for agriculture. With regards to our mandate, promoting dialogue, coordination, collaboration, coherence among processes and initiatives under the Convention, and fostering global, regional, national, and subnational collaboration activities in the context of the PCCB's collaboration with the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action could be considered. We could also help to promote and convene events at regional and/or global level to foster South-South and South-North knowledge sharing, collaboration, and coordination among activities. Concerning our mandate on strengthening capacity at national, regional, and subnational level, an idea could be to organize collaborative activities with national capacity institutions. This could be done through, for example, the University Network on Climate Change, and to push effective capacity utilization. Another potential activity is the organization of regional capacity building days in collaboration with universities. This week we have one of these examples. Finally, we could support the work under the Koronivia joint work on agriculture concretely in the context of our mandate of identifying, collecting good practices, challenges, experiences, and lessons learned. I have just heard several committees previous to my presentation, and there's a lot of lessons learned that we can share at our portal and at our hub that we are launching this week. So there are many ways that we can disseminate these lessons learned, and we could actually strengthen one another through these processes. Now, before concluding, I would like to just briefly present two of our latest activities, which I just mentioned: the launching of the PCCB Hub on a Facebook as part of our strategy to use social media as a tool to foster public awareness. Much of the work we have done has been done through voluntary work, which we appreciate, and we thank the volunteers that have supported us. The hub contains information on climate capacity building in support of the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. It is also intended for sharing information, resources, methodologies, as well as good practices, challenges, experiences, and lessons learned. In addition, information on relevant events, including webinars and on-site training courses, will be regularly posted on our hub. Users can also request the PCCB to create open or closed exchange network to capture and exchange knowledge related to capacity building. We believe this is a tool that can help promote capacity building related to agriculture. During the opening of our capacity building hub on Wednesday, the 5th, we will also officially launch our digital CB network on Facebook, enhancing the engagement of stakeholders and collaboration, as well as capacity building action. The series of events will be launched, and we invite all of you to visit us and take part of our activities. The network invites all CB stakeholders to actively engage and to remain closely connected at COP24. With this, I would like to thank you for your interest and attention, and please contact the PCCB in case you have any questions or suggestions for us. Lastly, this last slide contains time and venue information on the PCCB. We have a side event with the High Commissioner for Human Rights and also the CB Hub that will be at meeting Area E, meeting room 24. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rita. Once again, you had an excellent presentation, so many thanks. Does any of you still have a question regarding the capacity building Paris Committee? There is still opportunity now to ask questions. I see EU, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator. We would have one question. Do you think you might at one point go into like sectoral approaches, like have even if it's, let's say, on your Facebook site or it's part of an initiative that you look at agriculture in particular and you go through your 9 areas of work and see what can be done there?
Thank you for your question. As of now, the focus area has been decided for the 3-year period on implementing NDCs, and obviously agriculture is one of those issues that are very important. I believe that in our next meeting in May, we can approach this issue. As a matter of fact, we are part of the organization of the Durban Forum, and we can advise on the issues that we can approach. Therefore, I certainly will transmit the message and see what we can do from here on. But yes, it's very important for developing countries, so I agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question and very much thank you for the answer. I think it's now I don't see any more flags coming up, and therefore we would like to thank all the presenters for their excellent contribution. There has been a wealth of information. Sometimes I felt maybe even too much for me, so I need to digest it a little bit more time. I also would like to thank all the delegates and other participants for your questions and comments. That has been extremely useful reflections. And in all, it has been a very interesting overview of the work of the constitutive bodies so far. So we think that we thank you all very much for a very productive morning session. And I believe it's now time to move from the agriculture to the food, meaning that I would like to give you the good blessing and have a good lunch break. We will all come here, reconvene in this very same room, and we will start at 3 p.m. Thank you very much for your participation, your engagement, and have a good lunch. Thank you.